And we've got to talk about this busy SCOTUS. No, I did not say scrotum. I said SCOTUS. The Supreme Court of the United States of America has been at it again. Definitely making some very big rulings, one of which being or having to do with affirmative action as it pertains to college admissions. This has definitely been a debate in different circles for a very, very long time. The entire affirmative action, Title IX, conversation. But basically, in another majority, or I should say in another major reversal, Supreme Court struck down affirmative action policies at colleges and universities that use race as a factor in deciding who is admitted. In a pair of decisions, the 6 conservative justices ruled that Harvard, the nation's oldest private college, and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the oldest state university, were illegally discriminating based on race and violating the Constitution.
I could see that.
You can see that.
I can see that, and I'm big on school. I think school's important.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're at that level of education,
Mm-hmm.
race shouldn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It should only be on academics and achievements.
Unfortunately, though, not everybody in this country has access to the same quality and the same caliber and the same level of education as everybody else. And that is why affirmative action was actually put in place quite a few years ago.
So then why don't they fix the real problem, which is the lower education?
That I will never, ever, ever disagree with you. The fact that we needed a civil rights bill.
No, at that time it was critical, and it's still an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think that higher education should not take that into consideration at all.
Again, until you start to see a true, I don't even know the proper term, but I want to say like an equalizing, a leveling off across all groups of people in this country, I don't think that you can make that definitive claim. There are plenty of people, Justice Clarence Thomas being one of them, who have praised the opportunities that affirmative action afforded them. We've seen it time and again, Len, right? Like, so I'm going to take it out of the schools, right? And I'm going to take it to business, because affirmative action clearly had sweeping ramifications and a very broad scope, right? It applied to the workplace, and it basically was supposed to make it so, any environment was reflective of the surrounding community, or I should say the demographics, right? So if you live in a community that's 65% white, 25%, or I should say 20% black, and then 15% other, Black and Latino, your state schools in particular should look like that, right? If those are the demographics of the state of Massachusetts, then the UMass public education system, like the especially the higher, should be reflective of that, because
I mean, University of Florida, it's a public school. Yeah, it's a Florida state public school. But they base their intake on education, on the level, the criteria to get into even a state college now is way higher than it used to be. So, if you start adding race into that,
I mean, but it's been added.
No, I get it, but it's almost, it's not fair to students who, might not be.
It's not fair to the students who had everything at their fingertips. It's not fair to them anymore because they had too much advantage, and now you're
too much advantage,
and now you're penalizing them for that. Is that what you're saying? Is that your argument?
You take it to advantage of a kid, okay?
If your parents
I don't care how much
money
your kid has. I don't care how much money your kid is. I don't care any of that, okay? Kids who are smart and believe in education achieve
Lenny,
those levels.
College admission scandal. Just going to leave it at
No,
that.
like, that's a scam.
But that's what
But
you're
that's-
competing with, though. That's generations. That's legacy. If affirmative action is illegal according to the Supreme Court, so should legacy then. You shouldn't just get into a school, George Bush Jr., because you're the son of a former president. When you're he had no business.
That's not, first of all, that's not a public school.
But
Second
they just
of
said,
all,
no, they just said it for Harvard and the public school system. So they've proved that affirmative action across the board.
George Bush is not. I mean, if
then legacy. But legacy is legacy, Len.
Yeah.
Legacy is legacy. So because your kids go to youth school, their kids now have a leg up as far as getting accepted. And that's just at a high school level.
Let me ask you this. If you have, all right, so my kids go to private school, so their kids are going to have a leg up at going to that private school.
It's a don't.
But could it be based on the fact that they were good students throughout that school and they graduated with honors?
Lenny, it could, but we know, like, don't play dumb now and say, and pretend like this is not the case for why people fought so hard to get some sort of, equalizer. Because when it comes to the highest levels of education, and we're not talking about podunk U, we're talking about, when you talk about UNC Chapel Hill may as well be Ivy League. If you know anything about the U.S. collegiate system, UNC Chapel Hill is basically, it's not one of the original Ivies, but it is viewed by many academics as being up there. It's no different than, Stanford is an original Ivy League, but it too is viewed as being up there. Even the University of the Florida public schools, incredible universities. UF is constantly in the top 50 universities in the nation. Yeah. And that's going up toe-to-toe with the Harvards, the Yales, the Princetons, the Columbias, right? So this is not me pooping on state schools versus private schools.
So
But you don't think that legacy matters at a state school? Of course it does. If your name is on a building, the likelihood of you getting accepted into that school is pretty fucking high. You don't think so?
Yeah, but why does affirmative action work
because
against
those
that?
kids, because guess what?
Those kids are getting in no matter what.
No, what? The
legacy kids.
Yeah, but guess what? Do you know how few, especially when affirmative action was put in place, how few black or brown legacy students there are? Like, black and brown people couldn't even get into institutions of higher learning because of their skin color. So for decades, for centuries, they were penalized because of the color of their skin. So for a few years, we've said, you know what? Because for the past 200, we wouldn't allow you to step foot on this campus. You know what I'm saying? Now we're going to go ahead and say, we're going to set aside XYZ spots just for you guys. It doesn't mean that these students aren't bringing the grades. It doesn't mean that these students aren't bringing the extracurriculars. It'd be different if you were saying, okay, the kid with a 0.08 GPA is getting in just because they're black. It's not that. They still have to compete at the highest levels. They're just saying, we're going to set aside this amount of spots so that our campus doesn't look like, it looks more like Ben and Jerry's when you walk in and less like, I don't know, MacArthur Dairy Farm.
I get your point, but I still am not. Listen,
Lenny,
I think it's important. I think it's important for equality. Don't get me wrong, okay? But you're never going to compete against the 1% when it comes to their kids having privilege. You're never going to compete. That 1%, okay, which is literally just 1%. Of the population is that,
but you do
that
realize
level
that,
of legacy.
But you do, and yes, but when we're talking, first of all, it's 1% of Americans that are going to a lot of these higher end schools where this is even a factor. When we get into the backstory of why these schools were brought before the Supreme Court of the United States of America,